The king is dead. Long live the king!
Yes, we have a new incumbent in number 10 Downing Street.
Yes, Andy Burnham, the King of the North, has been anointed as King of the UK. Well, not really, Prime Minister, and he's taking up residence today in Downing Street. I'm Jack Izzard.
And I'm Peter Stimson.
And you're watching The Rate Stuff, your essential guide to all things mortgage. Stay with us as we unpack what a Burnham premiership will mean for the mortgage market. Trigger warning. This is going to sound a little bit like a certain football match, and I don't want to remind you too much of that, but there are uncanny echoes, Peter, aren't there? It was all going so well. We seemed to be in a good position. We were kind of cruising, and then somehow the inevitable.
It all went wrong. Inevitably, unfortunately, it feels like inevitably. Yeah, we had swaps coming nicely down. We got to, the 2-year went just below, 4%, down to sort of 3.98. And then they started lobbing missiles at each other again. And as we, record this episode, 2 years around 4.22, 5-year is around 4.28. The good news is it's not back up to the heights of where we were. If you go back to sort of, 6 weeks ago, 2-year was around 4.44 at one point, 5-year was nearly at 4.50. Oil was around, $110 a barrel. Oil as we think is only around $85 a barrel. So the market seems to have taken this latest sort of flare up in fighting in its stride somewhat. And we haven't gone back to those sort of heights. So it's gone backwards, but it's not gone backwards to the same extent.
Okay, so yes, of course, we are seeing the impact of the fighting in the Gulf feed through to the swaps market. But as you say, it has ticked back up, but it hasn't gone anywhere near the highs that we saw during the initial conflict. And I guess my question to you is are swaps and the mortgage market kind of learning to take this volatility in their stride a bit better?
Yeah, they've kind of seen the outcome. They kind of know that perhaps the impact is not as serious as perhaps it was first thought. There's alternative supplies of oil. So the market is not overreacting as it did first time round. So, it's taking it in its stride a little bit more.
I guess there's a sense that this kind of not war, not peace is the new normal, isn't it? So we've got this kind of memorandum of understanding between America and Iran.
Not understanding, yeah.
Or not understanding, yeah. They say they don't want to go back to an all-out war, and yet they still keep blowing things up.
Yes.
And that is probably going to be what happens for the long term. So we've kind of got to live with that. And do you think there is a sense of, even though that uncertainty is continuing, it is going to have less of an impact on swaps and we should have a less bumpy ride in the coming months?
Potentially. But I think there's always this danger that it flares up periodically and the swap rate kind of jumps and kind of settles back down again. So I think brokers out there need to kind of take that into consideration if they're offering products to, take into account of the fact that, that there may not be this smooth curve downwards and the expectation that interest rates continually just sort of filter downwards. There's going to be this kind of bumpy ride. You only have to take a look at, the swap curve over the last 2 or 3 years to realise that it's been anything but smooth. And there are these kind of events that occur that, have the potential to kind of cause these sudden upshots. And if a broker or a customer is coming off a fixed rate, at a particular point in time, they could come off at a bad point in the market and suffer this kind of, rate shock. So please bear that in mind if you're recommending particularly short-term fixed rate.
Yeah, and on the subject of product rates, well, of course, we have seen them come down since the kind of main part of the conflict ended. Those falls probably going to go on pause for a little while now.
Yes.
Because swaps have ticked back up. Let's just talk about base rate for a minute.
Yes.
I read a very interesting interview this week about base rate potentially going up in November as a result of this increase in swaps. Now, of course, there is no guarantee with that, but a couple of weeks ago, most people were saying, that's it, we shouldn't see any base rate increases for the whole of 2026, maybe early 27 for the first base rate increase. What's your take on that now? Do you think we could see a rate increase this year?
I think it depends on inflation and it depends on jobs. So my best, November's a long way away, is my first view. So you've got a lot of data to come through between now and then. Inflation, I suspect, will stay probably below 3.5. If it stays below 3.5, I don't think we'll get a bank base rate rise. the jobs market data is due out shortly. I don't think, depending on what that comes in like, again, unless the jobs market data comes in very strong, again, I suspect, which I suspect it won't, I think it's unlikely we'll get a bank base rate rise.
Okay.
And my best guess is that we'll probably get a cut early, mid-2027.
Oh, Peter, I like that. I'll take that.
But, I mean, it's a long way out and lots could happen in that intervening period.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, an interesting perspective on the monetary policy side there. Stay with us as we look at what might happen on the political side in the coming months. Guess the British Prime Minister. He's charming, he's handsome, he's a natural-born communicator, and he looks great in running shorts.
Is Boris back?
Maybe 3 out of 4 for Boris. But the man with the full package, so to speak, is Andy Burnham. He is our new Prime Minister as of today. And he may potentially make some big changes that will impact the mortgage market. So let's try and unpack what they are. Yes. Early days yet, we don't know the cabinet. We are hearing that Shabana Mahmood is the dead cert pick for Chancellor. And I guess that's the key appointment that we look at from a mortgage perspective. Quite a bit of relief from the money markets about her appointment. And that's largely because there was a lot of concern about Ed Miliband getting that job at number 11. What's the difference between the two? Why do you think Mahmood is seen as a better pick?
It's basically fiscal responsibility. She's more towards the right of the party, keeping control of the budget, less of a green agenda, and that's essentially it. It's basically having more control over the fiscal responsibility, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this sort of funny, sort of phony war period, if you like, in that we have a new Prime Minister, we will have a new cabinet. We don't really know what policies are going to change. Obviously, Burnham has talked a lot about change, but he's a leader of the same party. We haven't changed party, so we don't know what policies are going to change yet. But in terms of how the markets move, a lot of it is kind of on vibes, isn't it? Yeah. And Burnham is charming. He's all about the vibes, but ultimately that's not enough to be a good leader, is it? And so what is it we're going to need to see from him for the markets to feel comfortable and for there to be a bit of certainty?
It's concrete policies which are actually priced and sounded out. So basically, what is he going to do? How are these fully costed out? And can we actually pay for them without either raising taxes or borrowing more? Yeah. He's promised obviously not to borrow anymore, not to raise income tax, not to raise VAT. So if he does need to raise additional funding, how's he going to do it?
Yeah. So he's boxed himself in the same way that Starmer did. So he's got relatively little wriggle room in terms of the taxes he puts up. Yes. However, we've already heard a few nods and winks that he's quite keen on a wealth tax, potentially looking at overhauling council tax, and stamp duty as well, to replace them with a land value tax. So let's just look at that, because that could have a really direct impact on the property market.
Yes.
It's a funny one in that you're potentially replacing 2 taxes with 1.
Yes.
I mean, stamp duty, let's look at that first of all. I don't think anyone will be singing the obituary of stamp duty. That is a really unpopular tax, and it's a barrier to moving, isn't it?
It's a barrier to moving. It also is a barrier to downsizing. Yeah. So you've got lots of people, living in sort of 5-6 bedroom detached houses, single people, often in their 70s and 80s, want to downsize.
But just don't want to pay the tax.
Don't want to pay the tax on their next property. Yeah. So, if they're paying a substantial tax annually to live in these sort of properties, it's an incentive to move, and it's a fairer way of doing it. You've also got people, living in very expensive properties in, central London postcodes, paying a relatively small council tax for the value of the property. So, the whole system in terms of both stamp duty and council tax is fundamentally unfair. Yeah. Also, you look at council tax, properties haven't been valued since 1990. And it's estimated that at least 25% of properties are in the wrong banding. Even if you agree that the banding system was fair, people have redeveloped properties. Properties weren't necessarily valued correctly in the first place. So the whole system is just frankly broken at the moment.
Okay, well, let's break that down. So the stamp duty point, that's an interesting one. Funnily enough, that's a Tory policy to scrap stamp duty. So, you shouldn't see too much opposition from them on that. The council tax side, well, yes, as you say, the council tax system has become deeply flawed. We've got these valuations that were done in 1991, and of course there's been huge property inflation in certain areas since then, and so you do have these weird anomalies where someone living in a massive mansion in Chelsea may be paying the same council tax as someone living in a fairly ordinary family home elsewhere in the country. So all kinds of weird sort of distortions in the council tax market. Land value tax, as you say, will be more like the council tax in that it's a tax that you pay every year. But this is going to be the tricky one, isn't it? Where are the levels going to be set for that? Will that lead to a kind of regional distortion?
A north-south divide, given the land in the south is significantly more valuable than the land in the north.
Right. So could we see this as being great for the Andy Burnham, King of the North power base, but we in the south pick up the tab?
It's one of those things that God is in the detail. How is it done? So if you do it as just a straightforward percentage, obviously the South and London are going to get clobbered. There are different ways you could potentially implement this, where you have a base fee that everybody, for example, pays a base fee of, for example, £1,500 a year, and then a percentage fee on top of that. So you've kind of got some base equilibrium and then a percentage over and above that. Don't know. So, I mean, it's really dependent on how this is implemented. Because, like I say, if it's just done as a straight percentage, it's really going to clobber, expensive properties or land in the south and London, because, that's where the value is. And people are going to find their bills going up very substantially and potentially in the north going down very substantially. So it remains to be seen how that's done.
Well, and so let's just look at that from a kind of mortgage lending point of view.
Yes.
It's safe to assume that land value tax costs will need to be factored into affordability criteria in the same way that council tax bills are now. And assuming what you say plays out, that we see a big increase in high value parts of the country between what they pay in council tax now versus land value tax. That's going to make properties in the south less affordable, isn't it?
It swings and roundabouts. So, I mean, if you're buying, I don't know, a £2 million house in the southeast, you would be saving yourself a huge amount in terms of stamp duty. But then on the other hand, you maybe find yourself paying a £10,000, £15,000 bill potentially annually for that property. So, you give with one hand, you take with the other.
So brokers need to really be on. I know obviously we're into the realms of speculation here, but that is going to change the sums that brokers do in terms of affordability.
It will change the sums the lenders do, yes. So I mean, essentially, council tax at the moment is a debit that goes through into the affordability calculation. All that lenders will do is essentially change the debit calculation and relative to based on your postcode that you're buying in. So the debit calculation in the north may be a cheaper number. In the south, it may be a higher number, and it will just mean that the affordability calculations will, be plus or minus depending on your location of your property.
Yeah. Okay. And a couple of other things that we could see, as you said, stamp duty at the moment is a barrier to moving. It's certainly a barrier to downsizing. That could spark a bit of a surge in supply, couldn't it? People say, right, that's it. I don't need this 5-bedroom house. I didn't want to pay Rachel Reeves X grand to buy a new place. Now I don't need to pay that stamp duty to move. So a lot more supply. Could that depress prices even further, do you think?
It could get people keen on moving because they don't have to pay it anymore. It could also push people who own these properties not wanting to pay the sort of, whatever the £10,000 or whatever plus a year in stamp duty, the new land value tax each year, deciding they want to sell and get out now and can afford to do it because they're not having to pay the stamp duty to downsize. Yeah,
okay. So these things will do quite big things in terms of supply and distortions.
But it's going to depend on how it is implemented. So, it's what percentage is the land value tax charged at and how is it calculated?
Yeah. And this will not be a smooth process because obviously there'll need to be a consultation before it's done. And then it's probably safe to say that anyone who feels they've been badly done will appeal. So there'll be appeals in those areas where they're paying high taxes.
And you've also got to take into account of anybody who's bought in the last, say, 3 or 4 years and has paid potentially a 6-figure sum in up to 6 figures in stamp duty or even more. they're going to feel pretty hard done by if they then, bought last year and then suddenly, end up paying land value tax. Is there going to be a refund? Is there going to be some period of adjustment where they have a reduced period of land value tax?
Well,
going to have to be some sort of consideration for those people.
Well, by that token, is there? We talked about the abolition of stamp duty sparking a surge in supply and demand. If there is a date for when the stamp duty is abolished, could you see a kind of massive freezing of supply in the run up to that? So literally it goes tumbleweed, and then there's this kind of floodgates moment open when the law changes. So how they implement it and the dates, that's going to be quite distorting, isn't it?
There's going to have to do something, like I say, you're going to have to do something to stop the market going dead for a period of time, whereby there's either a rebate or there's some period where you get some discount on your land value tax if you did pay stamp duty, just to stop, like I say, the market kind of going dead for a period where everyone going, well, what's the point of me purchasing? Right. I'm going to be throwing £30,000 away, £50,000 away, whatever the sum is. So it's going to have to be done very carefully.
Yes. Okay. Well, we've strayed a little bit into the hypotheticals here, but there is definitely desire amongst Andy Burnham and his new cabinet to shake things up. Arguably, these are long overdue, and I don't think anyone is going to mourn the passing of stamp duty. Council tax, deeply flawed. So yes, great in principle, but as Peter says, the way it's handled, the way it's implemented could create all kinds of distortions in the market. Brokers and lenders will have to respond accordingly. And we on The Rate Stuff, of course, will keep you abreast of the changes as they come. But for now, welcome to number 10, Prime Minister Burnham. Good luck. You're going to need it. Thank you for watching The Rate Stuff. I'm Jack Izzard.
And I'm Peter Stimson.
See you next time.